The air in the Carrington estate always smells the same. It smells like fresh pine needles and old money. I stood in front of the massive marble fireplace, holding a small box in my hands. It was wrapped beautifully in expensive ivory silk. It looked like a gift meant for someone loved. It wasn't. I pulled the ribbon and opened the lid. Inside, I found a printed receipt for a Last Chance Love dating membership. Underneath, that was a paperback book titled How to Be Happy When You Die Alone. My sister, Sloane, covered her mouth with her manicured hand. She giggled like it was a harmless prank. My mother, Vivienne, didn't scold her. She just looked at me with that familiar, pitying smile. "Oh, Lila," Mom said softly, swirling her wine. "She's only teasing, darling. Don't be so sensitive, it's just a joke." It wasn't a joke, it was a message. It was their way of telling me I was broken and unwanted. I looked at the book in my hands, feeling the sharp corners press into my skin. I didn't cry. I didn't yell. I just stared at them. They thought they had won again. But they didn't know the secret I was keeping. Tonight, they were finally going to learn how it feels to be humiliated in their own home. Before we dive in, make sure to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and drop a comment below telling me, where in the world are you watching from? I stood there holding the insulting book, watching my sister laugh. It wasn't a warm laugh. It was a sharp, high sound like glass breaking. Sloane was beautiful. That was the first thing anyone noticed about her, and it was the only thing that mattered to my parents. She had hair like spun gold and eyes that were a perfect, icy blue. She was the Carrington ideal. She looked exactly like the oil painting of my grandmother that hung in the hallway. She was polished, expensive, and hollow. I looked at my father, Harold. He was sitting in his leather armchair, nursing a glass of scotch. He was chuckling along with her. He wasn't looking at me. He was looking at Sloane with that soft, proud expression he saved only for her. "Oh, look at her face," Sloane said, pointing a perfectly manicured finger at me. "She has zero sense of humor. That's why she's single, you know. Men like a girl who can take a joke." "Sloane," Mom said, but her voice lacked any real discipline. "Be nice to your sister. Not everyone has your spark." My spark. That was the word they used for Sloane. She was the spark, the fire, the light. I was just the wood that burned to keep her warm. I placed the book gently on the side table. I didn't throw it, I didn't tear it, I just set it down. My hands were shaking, but I hid them behind my back. "Thank you for the gift," I said. My voice was flat. "You're welcome," Sloane chirped. "I just want you to be prepared, Lee. We worry about you, the clock is ticking." I turned away from them and walked toward the window. Outside, the snow was falling on the massive lawn. It looked peaceful. Inside, the air was choking me. This wasn't new. This was the pattern. It had been this way for 29 years. I remember being 16 years old. I had just gotten straight A's on my report card. I had worked for months, staying up late, studying until my eyes burned. I wanted to impress Dad. I wanted him to look at me the way he looked at Sloane. I had walked into his home office that day. It smelled of cigar smoke and old leather. He was sitting at his massive mahogany desk, reading the Gazette. "Dad," I had said. "Not now, Lila, I'm busy," he mumbled, not looking up. "I just wanted to show you my grades. I got a 4. He turned the page of the newspaper. "That's nice, put it on the table." He didn't look at me, he didn't smile. Then the door burst open. Sloane ran in. She was 14 then. She was wearing a tennis skirt and holding a trophy. It was a small trophy, just a participation award from the country club's summer league. "Daddy, look," she screamed. Dad dropped the newspaper instantly. His face lit up. He stood up and walked around the desk to hug her. "Look at my champion," he boomed. "A winner, Vivienne, come in here. Our girl is a star." I stood in the corner, holding my report card. I watched them hug. I watched Mom run in and clap her hands. They took photos of Sloane with the tiny trophy. They put it on the mantelpiece, right in the center. I left my report card on the edge of the desk. The next day, the cleaning lady threw it in the trash. That was the rule of the Carrington house. Sloane's smallest whim was a headline event. My greatest achievement was a footnote. It got worse as we got older. Sloane was the vision of perfection. She went to parties. She dated wealthy boys. She spent money like it was water. Dad bragged about her debutante photo spread in the local magazine for months. He framed the article. It hung in the hallway, spotlit. Me, I worked. I kept my head down. I built a life quietly. 3 years ago, I started my own interior design firm. I didn't ask Dad for a loan. I didn't use his connections. I built it from the ground up. I worked 18-hour days. I ate dinner from vending machines. I slept in my office. When I landed my first $1 million contract, I thought, this is it. This is the thing that will make them see me. I came home for Sunday dinner. We were eating roast beef. The china clattered softly. "I have news," I said. I felt proud. I felt tall. Mom looked up. "Pass the salt, please, Lila." I passed the salt. I landed the Henderson account. It's a huge contract. My firm is going to design their new headquarters. Dad chewed his meat slowly. He took a sip of wine. Henderson? He asked. Old man Henderson, he's difficult to work with. Don't mess it up. That was it. No congratulations. No well done, just a warning. Then Sloane cleared her throat. Well, she said, touching her hair, I have news too. I'm thinking of getting highlights. Maybe a lighter shade of blonde. What do you think, Mommy? Mom gasped. She put her fork down. She leaned in, her face full of intense interest. Oh, darling, yes, lighter would be stunning on you. We must call Stefan immediately. Harold, doesn't she look like an angel? An angel, Dad agreed, smiling at her. They spent the next 20 minutes discussing hair dye. My $1 million contract evaporated into the silence. I sat there, cutting my meat into tiny, precise pieces. I ate every bite, even though it tasted like ash. I realized then that I was the shadow. I existed only to make the light look brighter. If I was dull and plain, Sloane was vibrant. If I was single and lonely, Sloane was desired. They needed me to be the failure so she could be the success. Mom called her my shining light. But a light needs darkness to shine. I was their darkness. For years, I accepted it. I thought if I just tried harder, if I was nicer, if I was more successful, they would love me. I bought them thoughtful gifts. I remembered their birthdays. I listened to their problems. I fixed their computers. I organized their parties. I was the useful daughter. Sloane was the prized daughter, but tonight was different. Standing by the window, watching the snow, I felt something shift inside me. It wasn't anger. Anger is hot and messy. This was cold. It was a heavy, solid block of ice in my chest. I looked back at them. Sloane was opening another gift, a diamond bracelet from Dad. She shrieked with delight. Mom clapped. Dad beamed. They looked like a perfect family in a snow globe. They looked happy. They looked complete. They didn't know that the person watching them was a stranger. They didn't know that Lila, the sad, lonely spinster they pitied, didn't exist anymore. I touched the ring hidden deep in my pocket. The metal was warm from my body heat. They thought I was alone. They thought I was pathetic. They thought they could mock me with dating memberships and self-help books because I had no one else to turn to. But I wasn't alone. And I hadn't been for a long time. The silence of the room felt heavy, but for the first time, it didn't weigh me down. It felt like the calm before a storm I had summoned. Lila, Mom called out, breaking my trance. Come sit down, don't lurk over there, it's depressing. I turned around. I put a smile on my face. It was a small, polite smile. The kind of smile a shark gives before it bites. I'm coming, Mother, I said. I walked back to the circle of warmth. I sat in my assigned chair, the one furthest from the fire, the one with the slightly stiff cushion. I waited. The dinner performance was about to begin. And this time, I had a speaking role they weren't expecting. To understand why I was sitting there so calmly while they mocked me, you have to understand what happened 8 months ago. You have to understand about Evan. I met Evan Blake in a coffee shop in Austin 2 years ago. He wasn't the kind of man my parents would choose. He didn't come from old money. He didn't wear Italian suits. He was a cybersecurity engineer who wore flannel shirts and had ink stains on his fingers. He had a laugh that made you feel safe. He was the first person who ever looked at me and didn't see a shadow. He saw me. When he proposed, he didn't do it in front of a crowd. He didn't hire a photographer. We were sitting on his back porch, drinking tea, watching the rain. He took my hand and asked me to be his family. I said yes. We decided to get married in the spring. We wanted it small, just close friends and family. Evan knew about my parents. He knew how they treated me. He had seen the texts they sent, the way I cried after phone calls with Mom. You don't have to invite them, Lila, he had told me gently. We can just do this for us. But I was stupid. I still had that little girl inside me, the one holding the report card, hoping for a pat on the head. They're my parents, I told him. It's my wedding. Maybe this will be the thing that matters. Maybe if they see me happy, they'll be happy for me. So I invited them. I didn't just send a generic card. I made them by hand. I spent 3 weekends on them. I bought thick, expensive paper that felt like fabric. I bought watercolors. Mom had once told me, years ago, that her favorite flowers were daisies. She probably didn't even remember saying it, but I remembered. I painted tiny, delicate daisies on the border of their invitation. I hand-lettered their names in gold ink, Mr. and Mrs. Harold Carrington. I wrote a note inside. Mom, Dad, Sloane, I know we aren't always close, but this is the most important day of my life. I want you there. I want us to be a family. Please come. I put the invitations in a box. I padded it with tissue paper. I stood in line at the post office for 45 minutes to make sure it was weighed and stamped perfectly. I paid for tracking. I wanted to know the exact second it arrived in their hands. I mailed it on February 10th. According to the tracking number, it was delivered on February 12th at 10:42 a.m. Signed for by S. Carrington. Sloane. I waited. Every time my phone buzzed, my heart jumped. I thought it would be Mom, crying tears of joy. I thought it would be Dad, grumbling about travel arrangements but promising to be there. I thought it would be Sloane, asking about bridesmaid dresses. 1 week passed. Then 2, then a month. I called Mom. She talked about the weather. She talked about her garden club. She talked about Sloane's new boyfriend Derek. She never mentioned the wedding. I tried to bring it up. Mom, did you get any mail from me? Oh, I don't know, darling, she sighed. We get so much junk mail. Sloane usually sorts it. Why? Nothing, I whispered. I checked the tracking again. Delivered. I told myself they were busy. I told myself they were planning a surprise. I made excuses for them just like I always did. The wedding day came. May 14th. It was a beautiful day in Austin. The sky was a deep, cloudless blue. We rented a small, restored barn with a garden full of wildflowers. It was simple and real, everything the Carrington estate was not. I put on my dress. It wasn't a designer gown worth thousands. It was vintage lace. I felt beautiful in it. But as I stood in front of the mirror, fixing my veil, I felt a cold pit in my stomach. I walked out into the garden. The guests were seated. Evan's family was there, his parents, his brothers, his cousins. They were smiling. They were happy. On the left side of the aisle in the front row, there were 3 empty chairs. I had placed little wooden signs on them. I had painted them myself. Reserved for mother. Reserved for father. Reserved for sister. They sat there like gaping wounds in the crowd. I delayed the ceremony. I stood behind the barn doors, clutching my bouquet of white roses until the stems bruised. Just 5 more minutes, I told the coordinator. Maybe their flight was late, maybe they got lost. Evan came back to check on me. He looked handsome in his suit. He saw me staring at the driveway. Lila, he said softly. He took my hands. His hands were warm. They aren't coming. You don't know that, I said, my voice trembling. I do know, and I'm sorry, but I'm here, and I love you, and everyone out there loves you. He wiped a tear from my cheek with his thumb. Let's go, I said. I walked down the aisle alone. I didn't have my father to give me away. I walked past the sea of smiling faces, past Evan's weeping mother, and then I walked past those 3 empty wooden chairs. They didn't just miss the wedding. They ignored it. They didn't send a card. They didn't send a text. They didn't send a gift. They simply pretended it wasn't happening. As I stood at the altar, holding Evan's hands, I looked at those chairs one last time. The sun was beating down on them. The flowers I had tied to the backs of the chairs were starting to wilt in the heat. They were drooping, dying, waiting for people who would never arrive. In that moment, as I said, I do, something inside me broke. But it was a clean break, like a bone that had been set wrong finally being rebroken so it could heal straight. I realized they didn't love me. Not really. Not in the way that matters. And for the first time, I realized I didn't need them to. I looked at Evan. I looked at the man who flew across the country to be with me, the man who held me when I cried, the man who learned how to cook my favorite soup when I was sick. This is my family, I thought. This man holding my hands. We got married, we danced. We drank cheap champagne and ate tacos. It was the best night of my life. The next day, I made a decision. I didn't call my parents to yell at them. I didn't demand to know why they didn't come. If they didn't care enough to show up, they didn't deserve to know it happened. I went back to being Lila the Shadow. I answered their calls. I listened to their stories about Sloane. I let them believe I was still the lonely, single, pathetic daughter living in a small apartment with her cats. I hid Evan. I hid the ring. I hid my happiness. I hoarded it like a dragon hoarding gold. It was too precious to let them touch it. I knew if they found out, they would ruin it. They would make it about them. They would criticize the venue or the dress or Evan's job. They would stain it. So I kept it secret. But secrets have a weight. And carrying this one for 8 months had made me strong. It made me dangerous. Back in the living room, watching Mom sip her wine and Sloane check her reflection in her phone, I thought about my wedding day. I thought about the wilted flowers on the empty chairs. I looked at the last chance love receipt on the table. How to be happy when you die alone. I almost laughed. I was happier than they could ever comprehend. And tonight, the debt they accrued on May 14th was finally coming due. The dinner bell rang, a sharp, clear sound. Dinner is served, the housekeeper announced. Wonderful, Dad said, standing up. I'm starving, let's go. I stood up too. I smoothed my skirt. I checked my phone one last time. Ready? I texted Evan. Always, he replied instantly. Give them hell, Mrs. Blake. I walked into the dining room. The table was set with the finest silver. The chandelier sparkled above us. It was a beautiful stage for a tragedy. I took my seat. I unfolded my napkin. I looked at my mother. So, Mom said, beaming at Sloane, let's talk about the wedding. Sloane, have you picked a florist? I picked up my fork. The metal was cool and hard. Yes, Sloane gushed. I want roses, thousands of them, white and pink. Perfect, Mom said. Then her eyes slid to me. The pity was back. Lila, maybe you can help your sister with the planning, since you have so much free time. I smiled. I'd love to, I said. The trap was set. All I had to do was wait for them to step into it. The dining room was cold. It was always cold. It was a cavernous space with high ceilings and dark wood paneling that seemed to swallow the light. Above the table, the crystal chandelier hung like a frozen explosion of ice. The table was set for 8. My parents sat at the heads of the table, like a king and queen holding court. Sloane sat to Dad's right, the seat of honor. Next to her was Derek, her fiancé. He was handsome in a bland, catalog model sort of way. He smiled a lot but didn't say much. Next to Derek was his father, Robert Whitfield. Robert was a shark in a suit. He was my father's biggest business partner. They were currently negotiating a $60 million merger between Carrington Oil and Whitfield Industries. This dinner wasn't just Christmas, it was a business transaction. Sloane's marriage to Derek was the ribbon tied around the deal. I sat across from Sloane, alone. There was an empty chair next to me. It was meant to be purely decorative, but it felt like a designated space for my loneliness. The maid brought out the first course, lobster bisque. The room filled with the sound of silver spoons clinking against fine china. Excellent bisque, Vivienne, Robert said, wiping his mouth. Truly excellent. Thank you, Robert, Mom preened. We flew the lobster in fresh from Maine this morning. Nothing but the best for family. She emphasized the word family. She looked at Sloane and Derek with misty eyes. So, Dad grunted, looking at Derek. Have you set a date yet? We need to coordinate with the merger timeline. The press release should go out before the wedding. Derek nodded. We were thinking June, sir. June feels romantic. Sloane giggled and rested her head on Derek's shoulder. June is perfect. I want it to be a garden party, but elegant, like the royal wedding, but better. I want a tent made of silk. Whatever you want, princess, Dad said, cutting his bread. Budget is no issue. We want the world to see how well the Carringtons do things. I ate my soup in silence. The creamy liquid tasted like nothing. I was watching them. I felt like a scientist behind a glass wall, observing a species of animal that ate its own young. Lila, Robert said suddenly. He was looking at me. He was the only one who ever acknowledged I was in the room. How is your firm doing? I heard you landed the Henderson contract. I looked up, surprised. Yes, actually, it's going well. We're in the design phase now and— Oh, Robert, don't bore yourself with that, Mom interrupted. She waved her hand dismissively as if swatting away a fly. Lila's little decorating business keeps her busy, but it's hardly high finance. Let's talk about real estate. Harold, did you secure the property in the Hamptons? I closed my mouth. The anger flared in my chest, hot and sudden, but I pushed it down. Wait, I told myself, just wait. Robert gave me a sympathetic look, but he turned back to my father. The conversation moved on. They talked about stocks. They talked about their yachts. They talked about people I didn't know. I focused on my breathing. In, out. I touched the phone in my lap, hidden under the napkin. The screen was dark, but I knew Evan was there. He was waiting on the other end of the invisible line. The main course arrived. Roast duck with fig sauce. Wine was poured. The atmosphere grew louder, more boastful. Then came the toast. Mom picked up her crystal wine glass. She tapped it lightly with a spoon. Ding, ding, ding. Everyone please, she said, standing up. She smoothed her red velvet dress. I'd like to propose a toast. Everyone raised their glasses. I raised mine too. To my beautiful daughter, Sloane, Mom began. Her voice trembled with theatrical emotion. And to her wonderful fiancé, Derek. Watching you two is like watching a fairy tale come to life. You are everything a mother could dream of. You are doing things the right way. Proper, traditional, perfect. She beamed at them. Then her gaze drifted across the table. It landed on me. The smile didn't leave her face, but her eyes changed. They went from warm to cold. It was the look she reserved for failed investments. And to Lila, she added. The room went quiet. My other girl, she sighed, a long, tragic sound. We worry about you, darling. We really do. Look at your sister. She has a partner. She has a future. She's building a life. Mom leaned forward slightly, swirling her wine. Tell us, Lila, when is it your turn? When are you going to stop playing with your little career and focus on what matters? We just want you to be normal, to be happy, like Sloane. Sloane smirked into her wine glass. Dad shook his head, looking at his plate as if my singleness was a personal failure of his management skills. It's not too late, Mom continued, her voice dripping with fake sweetness. That dating service I bought you, use it, please. For me, I just want to see you settled before I die. The table fell completely silent. Robert looked uncomfortable. Derek looked at the ceiling. This was it. This was the moment. I didn't look down. I didn't blush. I didn't cry. I set my fork down on the plate. The click was sharp and loud in the silence. I picked up my napkin and dabbed the corners of my mouth. Then I folded it neatly and placed it on the table. I looked my mother directly in the eyes. It already happened, I said. My voice was calm, it was steady, it didn't shake. Mom froze, her glass was halfway to her mouth. Excuse me, she said. She blinked. What did you say? I said it already happened, I repeated. I don't need a dating service, and I don't need to wait for my turn. Dad looked up from his duck, his heavy brows furrowed. Lila, stop speaking in riddles, he snapped. What are you talking about? I took a sip of my water. The cool liquid soothed my dry throat. I'm married, I said. 3 words. Simple, direct. They hit the table like a grenade. For 3 seconds, nobody moved. The room was so quiet I could hear the ticking of the grandfather clock in the hallway. Then the explosion happened. Dad's glass slammed against the table. Wine sloshed over the rim, staining the white tablecloth red. What the hell did you say? He roared. I said I'm married, I replied. I kept my back straight. I kept my hands folded in my lap. Since when? Mom gasped. She pressed a hand to her chest. Is this a joke? Is this some kind of sick joke to ruin your sister's night? It's not a joke, I said. We've been married for 8 months. 8 months? Dad shouted. His face was turning a dangerous shade of purple. You've been married for 8 months and you didn't tell us. Who is he? Who is this man? His name is Evan, I said. He's an engineer, he's kind, he's smart, and he loves me. Sloane started to laugh. It was a nervous, incredulous sound. Oh my God, she said, looking around the table. She's lost it. She's actually lost her mind. She looked at Derek, then at me. Her eyes were wide and mocking. Lila, stop it. This is embarrassing. You don't have a husband. You spend every weekend in your apartment watching Netflix. I see your location on Find My Friends. You never go anywhere. I leave my phone at home when I go to see him, I said, because I didn't want you to know. Why? Dad demanded. Why would you hide a marriage? Unless you're ashamed of him. Is he a criminal? Is he broke? Does he want my money? I hid him because I wanted to protect him from you, I said. Dad stood up. His chair scraped loudly against the floor. That is enough, he yelled. I will not be spoken to like that in my own house. You are a liar, Lila. You always have been. You're jealous of Sloane, so you made up a fantasy life to compete with her. He looked at Robert. I apologize, Robert, Dad said, breathing heavily. My daughter is unwell. She has these episodes. She craves attention. Robert looked at me. He didn't look angry. He looked curious. He was a businessman. He knew when someone was bluffing. And he could see I wasn't bluffing. Harold, Robert said quietly, let her finish. There's nothing to finish, Sloane shrieked. She was standing now too. She's lying. Show us a photo then. If he's real, show us a photo. I sent you photos, I said softly. I sent you invitations. I mailed them 8 months ago. I tracked them. They were delivered to this house. Mom shook her head frantically. I never saw any invitations. You're making this up. I did, I said. I mailed them to you. I reserved seats for you. I waited for you. And when you didn't come, I realized the truth. What truth? Mom whispered. That you didn't care, I said. You didn't just miss my wedding. You erased it. Sloane rolled her eyes. God, you are so dramatic. Erased it. Nobody erased anything because nothing happened. You're pathetic, Lila. You'd fake a husband just to feel special for 5 minutes. She looked at me with pure venom. You're a sad, lonely spinster, Sloane spat. And you're ruining Christmas. Just admit you're lying so we can eat dessert. I looked at them. I looked at my father, who was ready to disown me for embarrassing him in front of his business partner. I looked at my mother, who was looking at me like I was a broken doll. She wanted to return to the store. I looked at my sister, who was smiling because she thought she had won. She thought she had called my bluff. They thought they held all the cards. They thought this was their house, their rules, their reality. They didn't know I had the master key. I reached under the table. My fingers found my phone. I didn't look at the screen. I just tapped the message thread that was already open. I typed one word, now. I hit send. Then I placed the phone on the table, screen up. You want proof? I asked. The lights in the dining room flickered. What's that? Mom asked, looking up at the chandelier. Harold, the power. It's just the storm, Dad grumbled. The generator will kick in, but it wasn't the storm. Above the fireplace in the adjoining living room, visible through the open archway, was a massive 85-inch flat-screen TV. Dad used it to display stock market tickers and family photos during parties. Currently, it was showing a looped video of a crackling Yule log. Suddenly, the fire cut out. The screen went black. Then, a bright blue light filled the room. The TV turned on. But it wasn't a channel. It was a computer desktop. Dad squinted. What is that? Who turned the TV on? It's the smart home system, I said calmly. I installed it for you 3 years ago, remember? You complained it was too complicated, so you made me set it up. So turn it off, Dad barked. I can't, I said, and neither can you. Why not? Because you never changed the admin password, I said. It's still the default I set. Password 123. On the screen, a mouse cursor moved. It wasn't moving by itself. Someone was controlling it. Who is doing that? Sloane screeched. Is there a hacker? Not a hacker, I said. My husband. He's in Austin, I continued, my voice cutting through their panic. He's 1,400 miles away, but he's very good with computers. And right now, he's logged into your network. This is illegal, Dad shouted. I'll call the police. It's not illegal, I said. You gave me the login credentials. You asked me to manage the network. I'm just showing you some files. On the giant screen, a folder opened. It was labeled The Truth. Let's begin, I said softly. I picked up my wine glass and took a sip. The wine finally tasted good. It tasted like victory. The first image appeared on the screen. It was a scanned document. It was magnified so everyone in the room could read it. It was a FedEx delivery receipt. Date, February 12th. Time, 10:42 a.m. Item, large envelope. Signature, S. Carrington. It was unmistakable. Sloane's loopy, dramatic signature was right there in black and white. That's my signature, Sloane stammered. Her face went pale. Yes, I said, it is. I sign for packages all the time. That doesn't prove anything. Wait, I said. The cursor moved again. A video file was clicked. It was security footage. You have cameras at the front gate, I reminded them. And the front door. You had them installed for security. To keep bad people out, but cameras also watch the people inside. The video played. It showed the front porch of the Carrington estate. It was February. There was snow on the ground. A FedEx truck pulled up. The driver walked to the door holding a thick, padded envelope. Sloane opened the door. She was wearing her silk robe and holding a coffee cup. She signed the digital pad. She took the package. She looked at the return label. The camera was high definition. We could clearly see the label, Lila Carrington and Evan Blake. Sloane stood there on the porch. She read the label. She frowned. Then she walked over to the large recycling bin by the garage. She lifted the lid. She dropped the unopened package inside. She dusted her hands off, smiled, and walked back into the house. The video froze on the image of the closed bin. The dining room was dead silent. I looked at my sister. Her mouth was opening and closing like a fish out of water. You threw them away, I said. My voice wasn't loud, but it felt like thunder. You didn't even open them. You saw my name. You saw that it was important. And you threw it in the trash like garbage. I turned to my mother. I waited for you, I said to her. I waited at the altar for 30 minutes. Everyone was watching. I thought you were late. I thought you were stuck in traffic. But you were here. Sitting by the fire, probably drinking wine because she threw me away. Mom looked at the screen, then at Sloane. Her face was a mask of shock. Sloane, Mom whispered. Did you do that? Sloane stood up, knocking her chair over. I did it for us, she screamed. What? Dad asked. He sounded winded. I did it for the family, Sloane yelled, pointing at me. Look at her, she was going to have some trashy little wedding in a barn. It would have been embarrassing. If people knew Lila married some nobody engineer, it would make us look desperate. I was protecting the Carrington brand. She looked at Dad, expecting him to agree, expecting him to nod and say, good job, sweetheart. You protected our image, but Dad wasn't looking at her. He was looking at Robert Whitfield, and Robert Whitfield was standing up. He was buttoning his suit jacket. His face was stone cold. Robert, Dad said, his voice shaking. Where are you going? We haven't had dessert. I've lost my appetite, Robert said. He looked at Sloane with pure disgust. Then he looked at his son, Derek. Derek, Robert said, get the car. Wait, Sloane cried. She grabbed Derek's arm. Derek, baby, tell them I was just looking out for us. Derek looked at her hand on his arm. He looked at it like it was a poisonous spider. Slowly, he reached out and peeled her fingers off his jacket. You destroyed your own sister's wedding invitations? Derek asked. His voice was quiet. It was just paper, Sloane sobbed. It wasn't paper, Derek said. It was her life. He reached into his pocket. He pulled out the velvet box that held the engagement ring Sloane had taken off to wash her hands earlier. He looked at it. Then he dropped it on the table. It landed with a heavy thud right next to the fig sauce. I can't marry you, Derek said. I can't marry someone that cruel. Derek, Sloane screamed. Robert looked at my father. Harold, he said, the merger is off. Robert, please, Dad begged, standing up. This is a family squabble. It has nothing to do with business. It has everything to do with business, Robert said. A man who cannot manage his own house cannot manage a company. If this is how you treat your own blood, I can only imagine how you treat my shareholders. $60 million, Dad whispered. His face was gray. Gone, Robert said, with one sentence. Robert looked at me one last time. He nodded, a gesture of respect. Good luck, Lila, he said. You're the only decent thing in this house. Then he and Derek walked out. The front door slammed shut. The sound echoed through the house like a gunshot. We were alone, the perfect family, and the screen above the fireplace was still glowing blue, waiting for the next slide. The front door slammed shut, and the sound echoed through the house like a physical blow. The vibrations seemed to shake the crystal glasses on the table. For a long moment, nobody moved. We just stood there in the wreckage of the perfect Christmas dinner. The air smelled of roast duck and expensive perfume, but underneath, there was the sharp, metallic scent of disaster. My father was the first to move. He turned slowly to look at the empty doorway where Robert and Derek had just vanished. He looked like a man watching a ship sink with all his gold on board. $60 million, Dad whispered. His voice was raspy. $60 million. He turned back to the table. His face wasn't red anymore, it was a terrifying, pale gray. He looked at Sloane. Sloane was still standing, gripping the back of her chair. Her knuckles were white. She was staring at the engagement ring Derek had left on the table. It sparkled under the chandelier, beautiful and useless. He left me, Sloane whispered. She sounded like a child. He actually left me. Then the shock broke. The rage took over. Sloane let out a scream that didn't sound human. It was a high, jagged shriek of pure fury. She grabbed her wine glass and hurled it across the room. It shattered against the fireplace, splashing red wine all over the white marble. You, she screamed, spinning around to face me. You did this, you ruined everything. She lunged toward me. I didn't flinch. I didn't step back. I stood my ground. Mom jumped up and grabbed Sloane's arm, holding her back. Sloane, stop, compose yourself, Mom cried. Compose myself? She just destroyed my life, Sloane shouted, struggling against Mom's grip. She hacked the TV, she showed those videos, she's a snake, a jealous, bitter snake. I didn't destroy your life, Sloane, I said. My voice was calm. It was the only calm thing in the room. I just showed everyone who you really are. You destroyed yourself when you threw my invitation in the trash. It was a piece of paper, Sloane shrieked. Tears were streaming down her face now, ruining her makeup. Black streaks of mascara ran down her cheeks. Who cares about your stupid wedding? Nobody cares, you're nobody. Derek was a Whitfield. I was going to be a Whitfield. Do you know what you took from me? I didn't take anything, I said. Derek took himself away because he saw that you're cruel. You can't blame me for your own character. Dad slammed his fist onto the table. The plates jumped. Shut up, he roared. Both of you shut up. He glared at me with eyes full of hate. You think you're clever, don't you? He spat. You think this is a victory. You just cost this family its future. Do you have any idea how long I worked on that merger? Do you have any idea what you've done to our reputation? Reputation, I repeated. That's all you care about. Not that your daughter erased her sister from the family. Not that I was hurt. Just the money. Of course it's about the money, Dad yelled. The world runs on money, Lila, not feelings, not your little emotional needs, you selfish brat. You sat there and let Robert walk out the door. I sat there and told the truth, I said. The truth, Mom wept. She had collapsed into her chair, holding her head in her hands. The truth is you're vindictive. You planned this. You waited until Christmas. You wanted to hurt us. Yes, I said. I did. Mom looked up, shocked by my honesty. I wanted you to feel it, I said. For 29 years, I've been the invisible one. I've been the punchline. Tonight, I just wanted you to see me. And now you do. Sloane broke free from Mom's grip. She marched over to the table and snatched up the last chance love gift box she had given me earlier. Get out, she hissed. Get out of this house. You're not my sister. You're dead to me. I looked at the box in her hand, the membership card, the book on how to die alone. I'm leaving, I said, but I have something for you first. I reached out and took the box from her hands. She was too surprised to stop me. I opened it. I took out the book titled How to Be Happy When You Die Alone. I placed it gently in Sloane's hands. I closed her fingers around it. Keep this, I said softly. You're going to need it more than I do. Sloane looked down at the book. Her face crumpled. She looked like she was going to be sick. I turned to my parents. I'm going home now, I said. To my real home. To my husband. Don't bother coming back, Dad growled. He was pouring himself a drink, his hands shaking. I'm calling my lawyer in the morning. You're out of the will, you're out of the trust. You get nothing. I never wanted your money, Dad, I said. I made my own, remember, the firm you never asked about, it pays very well. I walked out of the dining room. My heels clicked on the hardwood floor. I went to the coat closet in the foyer. I put on my wool coat. I wrapped my scarf around my neck. My hands were steady. My heart was beating a slow, strong rhythm. Mom came into the hallway. She stood by the archway, looking small and old. Lila, she whispered. Her voice was desperate. Please, we can fix this. We can call Robert. You can tell him it was a misunderstanding. You can tell him the video was fake. I buttoned my coat. I looked at her. It wasn't fake, Mom. But family, she pleaded. We're family. You don't destroy family. You're right, I said. You don't, that's why I'm leaving. Because you people aren't family, you're just people I share DNA with. If you walk out that door, Mom said, her voice hardening, you are choosing to be alone. I smiled. It was a genuine smile. Mom, I said. I haven't been alone since the day I met Evan. You're the ones who are alone, you just haven't realized it yet. I opened the heavy oak front door. The cold air rushed in. It was freezing, biting, and sharp. It felt wonderful. It felt like waking up after a long, feverish sleep. I stepped out onto the porch. The snow was falling softly, covering the world in white. A car was waiting at the bottom of the driveway. Evan had arranged it. He was always thinking ahead. I didn't look back. I didn't look at the windows to see if they were watching. I walked down the steps, my boots crunching in the snow. I got into the car. The heater was on. It was warm. To the airport, ma'am? The driver asked. Yes, I said. Take me home. As the car pulled away, I watched the Carrington estate disappear in the rearview mirror. The lights were still on, blazing into the night. But inside, I knew it was dark. 3 days later, I was back in Austin. The air here was different. It didn't smell like pine and judgment. It smelled like rain and cedar and tacos. It smelled like freedom. I was sitting on the floor of our living room, wearing Evan's oversized flannel shirt and fuzzy socks. Evan was in the kitchen making coffee. I could hear the grinder whirring, a domestic sound that comforted me more than any symphony. The last 3 days had been a blur of decompression. I had cried, of course. You can't cut off a limb without bleeding a little, even if the limb was gangrenous. I cried for the little girl I used to be, the one who just wanted her dad to look at her report card. I cried for the sister I wished I had. But mostly, I talked. I told Evan everything. I told him about Dad's face when the money vanished. I told him about the silence after the door slammed. Evan listened. He held me. He didn't try to fix it. He just let me feel it. You were brave, he told me last night. You stood up for yourself. That's the hardest thing to do. Now the doorbell rang. I frowned. We weren't expecting anyone. I'll get it, Evan called out. He walked to the front door. I heard him open it. I heard the sound of a scanner beeping. Delivery for Lila Carrington, a voice said. That's my wife, Evan said. He emphasized the word wife. He walked back into the living room holding a FedEx envelope. I froze. My heart did a little stutter step. It's from them, I said. I knew it. I could feel it. Evan handed it to me. You don't have to open it. No, I said. I want to. I ripped the tab. Inside was a single sheet of stiff, cream-colored stationery and a cashier's check. I pulled out the check first. It was made out to Lila Carrington. The amount was $75,000. I laughed. A short, dry bark of a laugh. What is it? Evan asked, sitting down next to me. 75 grand, I said. That's the price of my silence. I picked up the note. It was written in Dad's sharp, angular handwriting. Lila, the situation with Robert is delicate. We are attempting to salvage the merger. Any further public outbursts or social media posts will damage our position. Take this money. It is a generous settlement. Consider it your inheritance paid in advance. Please stay silent. Do not contact us. Do not contact the press. Harold, I read it twice. No apology. No, I love you. No, I'm sorry we hurt you. Just business. Just damage control. They thought I was like them. They thought everything had a price tag. They thought they could buy my pain with a check that was less than the cost of one of their cars. What do you want to do? Evan asked. I looked at the check. I looked at the zeros. It was a lot of money. It could pay off our mortgage. It could buy a new car. But it was dirty money. It was money meant to choke me. I don't want their money, I said. I want the last word. I stood up. I walked to the kitchen counter. I took the check in both hands. Rip. I tore it down the middle. Then I tore the halves. Then the quarters. I tore it until it was nothing but confetti. I arranged the pieces on the counter. Next to them, I placed the note. I took out my phone. I snapped a photo. Then I opened the family group chat. The one titled Carrington Family. It had been silent since Christmas night. I attached the photo. I typed a message. Silence isn't for sale. I'm giving it to you for free. I hit send. Then I tapped the 3 dots in the corner of the screen. Group info, scroll down. Leave group, are you sure you want to leave this group? The screen asked. I pressed yes. The chat disappeared from my phone. It was gone. The digital cord was cut. I put the phone down. I felt light. I felt like I could float. Done? Evan asked. Done, I said. New Year's Eve arrived 2 days later. We didn't go to a fancy party. We didn't wear gowns or tuxedos. We flew to Seattle to visit Evan's parents. They lived in a cozy house overlooking the water. It was small, cluttered with books and photos, and it was full of love. That night, we sat around a fire pit in their backyard. We were wrapped in blankets. Evan's mom handed me a mug of hot chocolate with a splash of peppermint schnapps. Here you go, sweetheart, she said, squeezing my shoulder. We're so glad you're here. I'm glad to be here, I said, and I meant it. Evan sat next to me. He wrapped his arm around my shoulders, pulling me close. Across the water, the Space Needle lit up. Fireworks exploded in the sky, red, gold, blue. They were beautiful. I thought about my parents. They were probably at a gala right now. They were probably standing in a ballroom, holding champagne, smiling fake smiles, pretending their world hadn't cracked open. They were surrounded by people, but they were completely alone. I looked at the fire. I watched the sparks drift up into the night air. Hey, Evan whispered. I looked up at him. The firelight danced in his eyes. You okay? He asked. Any regrets? I thought about it. I really thought about it. I thought about the money I tore up. I thought about the family I lost. I thought about the little girl who waited for approval that never came. I took a deep breath. The air was cold, but I was warm. No, I said. Not one. I leaned my head against his chest. I could hear his heart beating. It was a steady, honest rhythm. I finally realized something, I said softly. What's that? I spent my whole life trying to find a home in that house, I said. But it was never a home, it was just a building. I looked at him, then at his parents laughing by the fire, then at the ring on my finger. I finally built something worth living in, I said. Myself. Evan kissed the top of my head. Happy New Year, Lila, he said. Happy New Year, I replied. The fireworks banged and popped above us, signaling the end of the old year and the beginning of the new one. I watched them burn bright and fade away. I wasn't a shadow anymore. I was the fire, and I was finally perfectly free. The video on the screen froze, showing the recycling bin where my sister had dumped my life. Sloane stood up. Her chair scraped loudly against the floor. She looked around the room, her eyes wild. She tried to laugh, but it came out as a choke. I was protecting the family, she stammered. She looked at Dad, begging for backup. You know how Lila is. Her wedding would have been in a barn. It would have been humiliating for us. I saved us from looking like hillbillies. She turned to Derek, grabbing his hand. Her grip was desperate. Derek, baby, you understand, right? I did it for our image. For the Carrington brand. Derek Whitfield didn't pull away immediately. He just looked at her hand on his sleeve. Then he looked at her face. He looked at her like he was seeing a stranger. You destroyed your sister's invitations? Derek asked. His voice was quiet, but in the silent room it sounded like a shout. It was just paper, Sloane cried. It didn't mean anything. It wasn't paper, Derek said. It was her happiness. He slowly peeled her fingers off his arm. He reached into his pocket and pulled out the velvet ring box, the one he had been holding earlier, admiring the diamond he bought her. He didn't hand it to her. He dropped it on the table. It landed with a heavy thud next to the butter dish. I can't marry someone that cruel, Derek said. I can't raise children with you, Sloane gasped. Derek, no. My father's business partner, Robert Whitfield, stood up then. He buttoned his suit jacket. His face was cold stone. Harold, Robert said to my father, the merger is off. Dad's face went gray. Robert, wait, this is just a family spat. It has nothing to do with the company. A man who can't manage his house can't manage a company, Robert said. If you let your daughter treat her own blood like garbage, I can't trust you with my shareholders' money. That's $60 million, Dad shouted, panic rising in his voice. Gone, Robert said. With one sentence. Robert nodded to me, a small, respectful nod, and walked out. Derek followed him. The front door slammed, sealing the collapse of the Carrington empire. For a second, the only sound was the hum of the refrigerator from the kitchen. Then, Sloane screamed. She lunged across the table toward me. Her face was twisted and ugly. You ruined everything, she shrieked. You jealous, bitter witch. You ruined my life. No, I said calmly, standing my ground. You did. You threw it away in a recycling bin in February. Mom rushed forward to hold Sloane back, but she was looking at me with tears streaming down her face. Lila, how could you? Mom sobbed. Christmas is ruined. The family is ruined. Are you happy? I'm not happy that you're hurting, I said honestly. I'm just relieved that you finally know the truth. Sloane grabbed the gift box she had given me earlier, the one with the Last Chance Love membership. She threw it at me. It hit my shoulder and fell to the floor. Get out, Sloane yelled. Get out of my house. I never want to see you again. I bent down and picked up the box. I opened it and took out the book. How to Be Happy When You Die Alone. I walked over to Sloane. She was trembling, her makeup running in black streaks down her cheeks. I placed the book gently in her hands. Keep it, I said softly. You're going to need it more than I do. I turned to my parents. Dad was pouring a drink, his hands shaking violently. He wouldn't look at me. I'm leaving, I said. For good. I walked into the hallway and put on my coat. Mom followed me. She grabbed my arm. Lila, please, she whispered. We can fix this. We can call Robert. We can tell him it was a misunderstanding. You had 29 years to fix this, Mom, I said. You didn't want to fix it. You just wanted me to be quiet. I opened the heavy front door. The cold winter air rushed in. It felt clean. Goodbye, I said. I walked out into the snow. I didn't look back at the house. I didn't look back at the windows. I just got into the waiting car and told the driver to drive. 3 days later, I was home in Austin. A FedEx truck pulled up to my curb. My stomach tightened when I saw it, remembering the last FedEx package that caused so much trouble. But this one was different. Inside was a cashier's check for $75,000 and a note from Dad. Please stay silent. Do not speak to the press about the failed merger. Consider this a settlement. He was trying to buy my silence. He still thought money could fix everything. I walked into the kitchen where Evan was making coffee. What is it? He asked. A bribe, I said. I took a photo of the check. Then, I ripped it into tiny pieces. I threw the confetti into the trash can. I opened the family group chat on my phone. It had been silent since I left. I attached the photo of the torn check. I typed, "Silence isn't for sale. I'm giving it to you for free." Then I pressed leave group. New Year's Eve arrived. We were in Seattle with Evan's family. We sat around a fire pit in the backyard, wrapped in blankets. Evan's mom handed me a mug of hot cocoa. "We're so happy you're here, Lila," she said warmly. Evan wrapped his arm around me. High above the city, fireworks began to burst, red, gold, and green. "Any regrets?" Evan whispered, kissing my temple. I thought about the empty chair at the Carrington table. I thought about the coldness of that house. Then I looked at Evan, and the warmth of the fire, and the family that actually wanted me. "Not one," I said, smiling as the sky lit up. I finally built something worth living in. Myself.